Hey, everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the Engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live, headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay, every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.
Hey, y'all, I'm KC.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is the elk hunting series from the Element Podcast.
If you want to get on elk, it helps to hang with dudes that know elk.
And that ain't us, but luckily the dudes that know elk have cell phones, and we called them up.
So whether you're a veteran of September or you're just cutting your ivories in the elk woods, you're going to hear something here that'll help you get the full draw this fall.
If you find this podcast helpful, poke that subscribe button and go check out our elk hunting playlist on YouTube. Now let's rock and roll. All right, y'all, on the show tonight, we've got Steve Chappell with Elk Camp TV. Steve, what's happening in your world right now, man?
Man, I tell you, I am just chomping at the bit to get started elk hunting this fall. I know the big bulls are shedding velvet right now, and I just got back from scouting in Arizona, and the bulls are really big this year. So I cannot wait to get out there and start hunting them.
That's cool. So you have quite a bit of moisture this year?
You know, we did early on when it was important for antler growth, like in the winter and spring, and so the bulls really did grow giant antlers. But we've had a relatively dry summer. Bulls are still giant, but what's caused is dryness and not much water in the ponds. It's mostly limited to drinkers and what we call game and fish strict tanks. Mm-hmm. So we're hoping for some monsoons before we hit September, but I think it'll be great either way, and we'll roll with it and have a good time. Yeah,
for sure. Kind of sounds like a standard year for elk in the desert Southwest. Is that kind of what you can bet on is, spring moisture and then a dry summer, and then hopefully the monsoons hit pretty soon so they grow out good tops?
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of how it goes down, and I'm just thankful that we've got great antler growth this year because it gets you excited when you see all these big bulls on your trail cameras to know what's out there potentially.
Yeah, that's cool. So let's talk about that some, man. I've done a whole lot of OTC hunting in Colorado, and then last year I was lucky enough to draw a Gila Wilderness tag and went on that hunt. But either way, trail cameras they've never been a part of my game when it comes to elk hunting. And I know that the country that you're in down there a lot, at least, where you've kind of made your living down there, like that's a huge deal for y'all, right?
I'll say it this way, Casey. I really use trail cameras mostly as just a barometer to gauge the antler growth of the bull crop for that year.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily use them for a tactical advantage, if you will. Mm-hmm. I can honestly say this in 100% honesty. I have never used intel from a trail camera to kill an elk directly. These bulls really sort around and move from where they summer to where they rut. And really my thing is just calling them in and having a great time doing that. That's kind of my forte.
Yeah.
And known for. So I don't want to be stuck just with checking trail cameras and trying to chase a couple of particular bulls. I say we're going to go out, we're going to call in a lot of bulls, and when that right one walks in, that we'll shoot him. And I know there's a lot of, differing opinions on trail cameras. I mainly just like to use them for the enjoyment of seeing the animals. I like to run them on video mode. So I see these elk in their, natural environment and watch how nasty the bulls are, even when they're in velvet toward each other. Always that order going on. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's cool, man. So tell us a little bit about, like, where you're at in the elk hunting world down there, and like the dynamic of things. You put a lot of emphasis on antlers, and that's because where you're at is a high trophy potential state, correct?
Yeah, and with that does come some pressure.
Yeah.
And I always tell guys that I'm going to guide. The first thing I'll say to you as a hunter is, if we go out there and we hunt without pressuring ourselves up and have a good time together and hunt as a team and hunt as friends, I promise you good things will happen for us. It's when we hang the whole hunt on the score of the animal and the success of it on the score, I feel like that's when you feel pressured up and you don't do as well. So I like to take that pressure off right away. Sure, I feel pressure within myself, and I'm a competitive person. So I don't want to add that on to the hunt any more than it's already there. And, most guys that I hunt with, they're not saying, 400 bulls, what I'm looking for. And if we don't get that, I'm disappointed. I'm usually the one that's more disappointed in myself, to be honest with you. I probably put pressure on myself, but it is fun. And I decided a long time ago that I would rather hunt in a state like Arizona, where the bulls are big like that, than to hunt myself elsewhere, where you're hunting small bulls and rough terrain and all of that. Arizona's just incredible, I got to say.
Yeah, it's a pretty neat place. I've only been there fishing, so I've never been there to hunt. But I've done. Tyler and I actually went together and went and fished the Black River there in the White Mountains, and it's just a beautiful place. Cool. I don't know. It's so unique. You think of the desert Southwest, if you've never been there, as like this just kind of monotonous, kind of hilly but desert place, and it's just not the case. There's so many intricacies to each terrain and each habitat, and it just seems like a really cool place to live. How long have you been down there?
Yeah, so I grew up in southern Colorado. That's where I was born. I went down there to go to college, actually, to Arizona.
Oh, cool.
Went to college in Prescott. There is where I started out. I played baseball at Yavapai College there. Actually pitched on the same team with Kurt Schilling.
Wow,
I don't know.
that's cool. Sweet.
I'm sure a lot of people know who Kurt Schilling is, but it was pretty cool to play on that team. We had a great team that year, and that's where I met my wife, who I eventually married. And that's how it all got started, was me going down there to go to college. And so love Arizona, love guiding down there. I also guide in southern Colorado with my dad on private land there. So it's kind of cool. I have the best of both worlds. I get a guide in Arizona during the rut on, the public land, these big giant national forests. And then in southern Colorado, we've got this private land, and we're able to hunt there. It's wild, free ranging elk, but kind of the best of two different worlds, I guess you could say.
Yeah, man, that's very cool. So did you grow up with the guiding influence around? Was your dad a guide when you were a kid?
He wasn't until I got into my early 20s, but he was always a hunter. And I seriously grew up in the country on dirt roads, middle of nowhere. I was this kid who got up and went out with my BB gun, and then graduated to a pellet gun and a 22 and so on. So, hunting was my thing in my life. And, the first time I got to big game hunt and elk hunt, I was just totally hooked and addicted to it. I knew it's something that I had to do every year for the rest of my life. So
that's cool. So, if you spent some time with the Red Ryder and whatnot, I know you have some experience with this, but would you rather have to eat a marmot or a pine squirrel?
Probably a pine squirrel, if I have to.
Really, man, marmots look so fat and nice, but I guess they're just not appetizing, huh?
Just the look of them, it looks like a mountain beaver or something to me.
I think it looks like a mountain donut.
Oh, that's cool, man. So tell us a little bit about maybe since you grew up in southern Colorado, very, for all intents and purposes, a lush area, a place you're going to have quite a bit of moisture, some high country, and then hunting in Arizona is going to be quite a bit different, right? I mean, it's very moisture dependent, like you were saying earlier. I mean, even dependent so much on human, interference, for lack of a better word, right? Or help to have water for those elk to exist down there. Like, what is that like?
Yeah, you're very right about Arizona. I mean, where you guys fished in the White Mountains, those are higher elevation units. There's more natural water there. So, elk can live there naturally without, human water sources in that part of the state. However, in the north central part of the state and the northwest part of the state, you're exactly right. Without those man-made water sources and those game and fish trick tanks that basically sustain those elk during the drier parts of the year, there just really couldn't be elk there, because that's one thing about elk. They have to have water. They're not like mule deer and, can go without water for long periods of time. And then in southern Colorado, it kind of depends on where you're at within southern Colorado. Like where we're hunting there is very semi-arid. It's got a similar climate to Arizona. Maybe 12 to 15 inches of annual precipitation, so it's pretty dry.
Oh, wow.
But then we can look up and see, the big San Juan Mountains, where, again, you've got, 9, 10, 11, 12-foot thousand elevations, and you do have springs and seeps and creeks and rivers and natural water sources where the elk are sustained by. So, it is very diverse down here in the Southwest, like you said earlier. You do have everything from those alpine climates and vegetation, down to real plainsy cedar pinyon and even lower sage flats down in the 6,000-foot elevations.
Yeah. So with that said, how much time, and you're a guy who is very good at calling, how much time have you spent hunting water holes, and did you grow up doing that in Colorado at all?
I can say this. I've guided in Arizona for a little over 20 years now, and I've had one hunter that I've personally guided in all those years kill a bull at a water source. All the rest of them have been on call-ins. And I will say that one hunter, he was from Colorado. He was one of the most very capable physical hunters I've ever guided. So we did call some bulls in on the hunt. It just didn't happen to work out as far as shot angles and all of that for him to kill a bull on a call-in. But yeah, he was the only guy back in 2008, and all of the other ones have been on really fun, dramatic call-in, which is cool.
Yeah, so the shot angles were a problem. What shot angles are you talking about that gave him fits?
Yeah, mostly quartering on, or the bull coming in from a direction that wasn't anticipated, that type of thing. I really appreciate guys who don't take quartering on shots, and I do talk to my hunters, and I tell them that if you release an elk on an arrow on an elk that's not perfect, your nightmare has just begun, as you guys probably know. These elk, if you hit them perfectly and double lung shoot them, I mean, they're like a lamb. They lay down and die fast.
Yeah.
But if you make marginal or poor hit on them, they're like a dinosaur. You are not going to find them. So yeah, I really encourage guys to take good shot angles. I will say that in the right situation, if it's super close and open, I'm not completely opposed to frontal shots, but again, at close range, and putting the arrow in the right spot. But yeah, that quartering 2-shot is a nightmare in the making.
Yeah. How close and what's the right spot on a frontal? Best you can explain it with, out having a visual.
Yeah, I kind of say 25 yards and in. 25 yards and in, and I want that elk to be either standing or maybe just slowly still walking forward at you. You don't want to take a moving shot when they're walking broadside to you, but if they're moving towards you and walking slowly. And I think a lot of guys think the sweet spot is down lower in the brisket area. I believe that sweet spot is up there kind of in the dark base of the neck mane, where you still have that dark neck mane color, so that arrow is going straight into the lungs and then into the vitals.
Yes.
At the right. You don't want to shoot too low and hit that brisket area.
Oh, especially if you have any downward angle to your shot at all. I think that's something that you really have to consider too whenever you're taking that frontal. If you're on an even plane, you're good, especially even on the lower end of it. But if you're shooting downhill at all, or that elk has his head hung low, I can definitely see a world where you just end up just clipping meat, and he's bugling the next day.
I should also say, I talked about the elk if he's moving slowly toward you. The reason I say that is because I think a frontal shot at an alerted elk, if that elk is stopped and he's alerted to something is up and you release that arrow, he can whirl and it can cause, a bad hit. So I would take that, slowly moving, unaware shot than an elk that's alerted. I think that can be a bad shot.
Yeah,
so
that's a good.
Guys gotta be aware of the situation.
Yeah, that's a good tip, man. I actually shot or I hit a bull high in the shoulder last year, which was a terrible thing to happen. But he was alert at 22 yards, and he, ducked the arrow like a whitetail. It was very surprising. I've never had one do that before, and he dropped probably 4 inches or so, which was the difference in, hitting double lung and not. It was a terrible thing, but he was fine. You know how it goes. They're pretty resilient, but you still hate to do it. But I've kind of taken not a long path comparatively. I've hunted elk for off and on for 8 or 9 years, and originally started out with my whitetail, lightweight arrows, and actually killed an elk with one of those, and it was fine because it was, a lethal hit. But I've had some stuff happen both with hits and then just, deflections and different things like that have really led me to shooting a heavy arrow and a good fixed blade broadhead. I shoot the day 6 pairing, with day 6 arrows and those well-made broadheads. Do you kind of put restrictions on guys, or at least talk to guys about what their arrow setup should be for elk hunting?
Yeah, I do talk to them. I mean, I don't totally dictate it to them, but I especially ask them, if at all possible, to shoot a fixed blade broadhead, like you say. I'm not sponsored by any of these companies, but I will say I've seen incredible results, like with the G5 Montec, a G5 Striker, I believe it is.
Yeah.
It's a 3-blade. That's an awesome head. Have had very good success with the Whack'ems, and also Muzzies and, slick tricks. I just really like those cut-on contact, very well put together heads. And I think if they're one piece, I mean, that's even better if you can get good flight and you tune your bow well with it. Mm-hmm. I would say probably the best, fastest kill I've ever seen on an elk was a bull that I called across. He was on the wrong side of the fence. I called him on the right side of the fence. He came onto our side of the fence, and my hunter shot him, and that bull was dead within 30 seconds with a G5 Montec.
Wow. Man, Smoke City is what we like to call that. That gets me hot, man. That's cool. So do you find that elk hits in the heart versus like a double lung, which is the better shot? I know it's it's hard to choose which one you're going to make. You're really just trying to hit vitals. But when you've had a lot of experience with elk being shot, what does it seem like is the more advantageous shot?
Man, I don't know that I would really know that, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I like the double lung shot. I tell my guys I like that shot between a third and a half and halfway up the body height wise, and I like them to air not toward the shoulder, because I've hit some elk personally in the shoulder, and I kind of gravitate to that. So I tell guys, man, air back like 4 or 5 inches behind that shoulder and make that be your aiming spot, because that shoulder hit is just not good.
Yes.
So again, I like that third to halfway up the body, and 4 or 5 inches behind the shoulder to me is the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I guess above the heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and realistically, not to downplay the difficulty of killing an elk by any means, but they have a large vital area compared to other stuff. I mean, you're shooting at a 5-gallon bucket or bigger, So like you're saying, you don't have to really crowd the shoulder too much, especially if you have a decently close shot and you feel very confident to be able to hit him in the vitals. It makes sense for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, so from what I've seen of where y'all hunt, and I'm sure there's more that I haven't seen, but you do a lot of stuff in the P&J country. Is that correct?
I kind of hunt both. If I hunt pine country, I like it to have a little bit of vegetation, a little undergrowth, not just be open pines. I'll hunt both. You're correct. PJ country is very good, especially for archery hunting, because you can get in tight, and even on bulls with cows, you can get tight to them because the cows can't look and see you approaching. And that's what I like about PJ country, is that you can get the wind right, aggressively move in and get close to bulls and, work them without them potentially picking up on you on the approach.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of my big questions on that is because I've never really hunted that stuff. Well, I did a little bit, last season in New Mexico, but most of it was pinyon country, or big ponderosa pines.
Yeah.
I feel like in P&J you could really set yourself up. I don't know if you could say for failures, but for some difficulties, because you might end up where a bull is on top of you before you know it. I've seen guys on TV before who call in bulls and they're like at 5 yards all of a sudden walking pretty briskly, and then they do a cow call to stop him and he freaks out, So how do you kind of play that to make sure that you have, you want the elk close, of course, but a realistic shot distance of like that, really comfortable 20, 25-yard type shot?
Yeah, picking good setups is everything. And like you say, I'm definitely not above having elk come in and spoil things, especially smaller bulls that are not vocal. My dream is a bull that's vocal and is responding well to the calls. And then you can really keep tabs on where he's at and how he's approaching. And I really try to place my hunters to where they have a good size opening in front of them, where that elk is going to walk across and they're going to have a good shot angle. And then I'm going to drop back and I'm going to try to call that bull to the upwind side of my hunter and bring him by for that broadside opportunity. And that bull doesn't even have any idea that hunter's even in the world. And that can even happen too. I can be calling and I can have a silent, like a spike or a raghorn, come in on me and blow the setup as well. So again, I've had that happen, enough times that I mention it here. But yeah, picking good setups is the key, because if you pick a setup where you just have a little alley, a little opening, and that bull, especially if you're calling for yourself, they're going to come in head on usually, and they're going to stop and look. And when they don't see what they want, they're going to, get out of there. Sometimes you'll have an opportunity as they're moving away at a quartering away shot. So a guy needs to be aware of that. But I always try to pick setups where there's plenty of shooting opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Do you ever use a decoy in those scenarios where the elk are really looking for something?
I do. I have really become a believer in those decoys.
Cool.
I'm not sponsored by this company, but I've had incredible success with that Montana decoy. Eichler elk is what it's called.
Yeah.
After Eichler. And I've also seen, I haven't tried it personally, but I've seen really good results with that Ultimate Predator decoy. You can mount on a bow. It is amazing, guys, and I'm sure you've probably seen this with your hunting, how those decoys can completely dupe the animal you're hunting. I've literally, with that Montana decoy, I can be in the wide open with me, my hunter, and a cameraman, and I've had 100 to 150 elk in front of me and be moving in on them in clear view, and they absolutely don't have a clue about what's going on because of that decoy.
That's cool.
That takes some intestinal fortitude to actually try that, though.
Yeah. You feel like it's ridiculous. You really do. I mean, it's almost laughable after it happens. My hunter usually is just going, "Are you kidding me?"
I paid you what, and we're going to do what now?
Roll right in on them, and that brings up another good point. When I use a decoy, I don't want to act. I don't want to move like I'm a predator.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I want to just kind of casually stroll at the elk as if I'm just relaxed and moving in, going to join up with them. Yeah, if I can, if there's shade available, I'll stick to the shade as best I can. And I absolutely use the wind still, because if they smell an elk that smells like a human, that's not going to go over.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's amazing. And again, I found that just being fairly nonchalant and natural and just strolling in at a nice, easy pace seems to be the key to success with those decoys. I typically, when I'm calling, by contrast, if I'm guiding someone or if your listeners are hunting with a buddy and they're calling, my biggest key when I'm calling is I want to be in a position where that elk cannot see me as the caller as he's approaching, because as long as he cannot see my calling position, I found that they will continue to approach and move toward the caller and give your hunter a broad shot. Whereas if I'm up there calling too close because I want to see the action and I want to have a front row seat, which is very tempting to do, I found that when they get to that position where they can see the calling position, that's when they don't like it. And I feel like a lot of times, even if you had a decoy there, they would be very likely to stand off and look at the decoy and display and bugle at it and expect it to move to them at that point. So I feel like being further back and keeping that elk approaching the invisible calling position is the better tactic.
Yeah, I know it's situational, but what is that distance? Just if you could throw a number out there.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it varies mostly from 50 to 100 yards back from my hunter. And you're exactly right. The terrain and the vegetation is going to dictate how far back I am. So typically, I want to be as close as possible to my hunter, but yet still be my calling position, be invisible to that approaching elk, if that makes sense.
So with all that said, a lot of guys that hunt solo, like one of the big issues that from what I understand, is that they are, they're having to call as well, so they can't obviously stand behind themselves. So I kind of have a couple of questions in regards to that. I guess since we're talking about the decoy stuff, would you say that a decoy is particularly advantageous for a solo hunter who, the elk is going to be using the window principle essentially, and it's going to see your position from where you're calling and lock up a lot of times?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that guy who's going to be the solo hunter, not only do you want to throw your calls around and try to confuse the elk a little bit as he's approaching as to exactly where you're at, and then get quieter with your calls as he gets closer. But I would be a real proponent of having that, either having, like my Montana decoy off and to the side of you, mounted on a tree or something, or having that ultimate predator decoy mounted on your bow.
Yeah. So how likely would you be, if you didn't have a decoy as a solo hunter, to, if you've got a bull coming in, to make a call and move up 40 yards or something like that?
Yeah, I have to be honest. I haven't used that strategy yet. I think it will come into play at some point if I'm a solo hunter. But I can see the value of that. Absolutely. And that's because, as you guys know, and as we're talking about, an elk's depth perception is amazing. I mean, it's incredible how from, say 300 yards away and know exactly the tree where that call was coming from, even if you're doing your best to project the sound elsewhere. So yeah, blowing a call or a few calls and then moving forward and setting up could be very deadly. Absolutely.
Sounds scary. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Might have to run you over.
Yeah.
What is equally impressive is my inability to know how far away they are. Like, it's like, I think that was 80 yards. Maybe it's 600. I don't know. It's just like the mountains can really play some tricks on you with the way those bugles work sometimes. Let's make this a podcast. Is there any way to kind of, that you found to judge distance, or is it just experience?
Man, I think it's just experience, and I think it's a little bit to do with, just an individual's hearing.
Yeah.
I have to say, I hunt with a lot of different people, and what I'm most amazed by is how I will hear a bugle, and they'll hear it too, but they'll point 90 degrees different.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
And I always say to my wife, the day when I either can't hear the bugling that my client hears or I'm hearing it in the wrong direction is when I'm done as a guide, because I feel like then I'm no longer effective. But I think I'm real blessed with good directional hearing and knowing distance. And I think a lot of that, like you say, just comes with just being out there and doing it a lot and making mistakes too.
Yeah.
I've my share of moving toward bugling elk that I think further away, and they're probably closing the distance coming to the call, and I bump them, and I'm standing up with my pants down, and there they are.
Well, that's funny. Well, I captured one of my silliest mistakes on film a couple years back. I was doing contact bugles early in the morning, just trying to get some answers, and I was in a box canyon and was catching my echo at the end of my call and was thinking that it was a bull answering quickly, and after about 3 times I was like, wait a second, that sounds just like my cadence. It's just like you said, you got to mess up a few times, and I haven't had enough years to make all the mistakes yet, so I'm still making them along the way. But one of the interesting things on that note is I shot a bull in 2018, and he was there's quite a few bulls up on this dark timber hill. It was late in the evening. Weather system had moved in, and they turned on. Just a great evening elk hunting, and stalked in, and actually was just pretty much spot and stalked this bull and made cow calls right at the last second to get him to move closer. But right before I called to this bull, and he was by all intents and purposes the herd bull. He was a bigger bodied bull, but not quite a large antlered bull. Just you know how it is in Colorado sometimes. They just don't always have the genetics to be giants. Well, anyways, This bull throws his head back and just lets out the purest sounding bugle, but it was about 30 decibels lower than you expected it to be. It was just a little whistle, and if I hadn't been there to see it, I would have assumed he was 200, 300 yards away when really he was 35 yards away when he did it. It was the strangest thing. Do you see pressured animals do anything like that, or what do you think about that?
They can really, really not only make sounds that you just can't even imagine that an elk would make, like you say, unless you were standing right there. But yes, their volume level can vary so much with bugling or cow calling. I've seen cows at various times when they're excited or intense. They can be calling loud enough you can hear it a mile away. Or like you say with that bull, you can be up 20, 30 yards from them, and it's like they're whispering.
Yeah.
They're just amazing to me. And I feel like in all the years of hunting them, I learn something new every year, and every bull and every setup can be different. I like to say that I can kind of classify bulls into 3 categories. There's bulls who are, fairly passive. There's some who are super aggressive, and there's some that are in the middle. And you have to deal with each one a little differently, but that's what makes elk hunting so much fun.
How do you pick that out that quick? How do you quickly pick something out, or the attitude of a bull out like that?
Yeah, a lot of times it's just from the sound of their bugle, the aggressiveness of the bugle, the volume of it. Whether or not they're backing it up with chuckling or grunting, which to me just adds, more emotion and punctuation to that call, if you will. That's how I really determine it. So it kind of tells me what I need to get back to them. I will say this, kind of what I've learned, I would say maybe the last 5 years. I used to just kind of be just a pure cow caller, and I called in a lot of elk cow calling, and I still do cow call a lot. But when I use bugling is when I'm dealing with herd bulls, and that's really where I've had my breakthrough, calling in some really nice bulls in Arizona, is recognizing that a bull's a herd bull by his aggressiveness, the frequency of his bugling. And then a lot of times as you're moving in, you'll see cows that used to scare me to death. And now I kind of lick my chops and think, okay, this bull's vulnerable because he has cows, and he's going to jealously guard what he has. Now, the first mistake I could make is if I bugle from too far away, the natural reaction is he's going to push the cows away, or the cows are going to push away, and he's going to follow them. But I found if I get right in on him and get right in amongst the herd, and it's kind of dicey and hard to do, without making a call, and I get myself into that position and get my hunter ready and blow that lip ball, or some people call it a display bugle. And again, you have to do it with the right volume, the right tone, and the right emotion. I like to say I'm making a statement at that bull and not asking him a question. I'm here to take your cows. I'm flirting with your cows, and I'm punching you right in the nose, dude, all at the same time. And I'm telling you, those big aggressive bulls will come right over when you blow that call that way.
Man, it's the difference in you want to go outside and let's take it outside, right? Like that's the difference.
That's right.
Totally, absolutely. And when you say that, also winking at his girlfriend or his wife as you're saying.
Oh, that's cool, man. So, do you, since it has that many intricacies to it, is that something you're going to suggest people learn to try to do as new elk callers, or is that? Would you tell guys, hey, if you actually want to go kill elk, just stick to the cow calls and you'll make it happen?
Yeah, I would say by and large, that's exactly right. I would say you're going to, in general, I want to say in general, because I know guys who are super successful bugling. And you know what I attribute it to? Number one, understanding elk, knowing positioning and when to bugle. And then number two, they sound good when they bugle. You got to sound good, for them to believe it. So I would say if you're an earlier, beginning elk hunter or maybe intermediate, and you feel like you're still, trying to master the calls, I would say cow calling is going to get you much further than just bugling at everything. Especially with satellite bulls, because you got to know that satellite bulls, that's what they're all about. They're all about, hey, I'm alone. It's rutting. I'm feeling it. I want to get with some cows. And that cow call coming from over there, that's what I want. That's what I'm about. So, I would say in my career, I've called in 80 or 90% of the bulls I've called in with cow calling versus bugle.
That's cool. Yeah. And that's kind of countercultural compared to what you see a lot in media, because don't get me wrong, it is cool to go out in the woods and rip a bugle, right? It's a lot of fun to do that and to have that chess game with a bull and try to say the right stuff and entice them in. But I think it's so cool to maybe speak the sweet tones, and be able to really have a high rate of success on call-ins. I want to get into the herd bull stuff here in a little bit, but for the guys who are, trying to kill a bull, like we were just talking about, especially with like the satellites and the young, 4 and 5 points and stuff like that. Can you give us a little insight into that cow calling and what that sounds like? I know that, the standard mew is kind of what everybody learns right off the bat, but what's that sequence sound like somewhat?
Yeah, I'm mostly calling them in with what I call just a standard nasally mew. And that vary person to person what they think that sounds like. And I'm not overdoing it either. I just like to blow it in kind of just a soft, medium, sweet, sexy, nasally, three-dimensional way. And I'll say this, in my calling career, I have called in the most bulls with open reed calls versus mouth reeds. Even though I can blow a mouth reed, I think those are harder for people to master. So if you're that guy who's still in that journey of improving on your calling, I say, man, start out with an open reed call, master that, and then work on your mouth reed calling. Because these open reeds, just by design, they just have that three-dimensional nasal quality to them.
Tyler and I had this conversation the other day, and I've used Rocky Mountain calls, or Rocky Mountain hunting calls, Rocky Jacobson's brand, and you've got the signature series there. I've used those my whole elk hunting career, but I've always been the mouth diaphragm guy. And him and I talked about this, and I said, I know that the bite and blows or open diaphragm, open reed calls, they sound sweeter, but it's the convenience of having that diaphragm in your mouth and being able to do the gamut of what you need to do with it, and that's why I go with that. However, I really think you're onto something there, because the best call I've ever used, I don't even think they make it anymore. My granddad gave it to me. It was like sort of an open reed, but it had rubber around it, and it was kind of a bite and blow pretty much, and you could just, it's almost like you could play the flute with it, because you could just make so many subtle, different little sounds to it and whatnot. I know you kind of have had your hand in some design of some of those calls. Is that right?
Yeah, and it's mostly been open reeds and then mouth reeds as well, and then most recently a bugle tube, which I am really proud of and love, called the Rogue. So this newest open reed call that we came out with just for this year, I had it as a prototype last year. We call it the Heartbreaker. It has an aluminum barrel, which you would think would make it sound harsh and overly loud and brash, but it's just the opposite. It sounds real mellow and rich. I've got it right here. It probably won't come across really well over the phone, but I'll just blow it three times.
Let's do it. I love it. I love it.
That's what it sounds like. And I'm just going to blow that call, or really any cow call that I'm using. I'm basically just going to blow 1 to 3 calls in a sequence. And when that bull responds back to me, same way, I'm going to let him bugle, give him time to cock his ears back and listen for me. And then again, I'm just going to give him that little bit of encouragement. I'm not going to overdo it, and I'm not going to be too passive. I think you can be both ways. You can, blow a bunch of blah, 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 blah at him and wow, not ready for that. Or you can not call back, and there's a lot going on out there in the elk woods, and he hears a bull bugling off in the distance, and he thinks there's probably cows with that bull. So I'm going to go there because this person is just not talking enough. This cow's not, ready for me. So yeah, I like to give them that encouragement every time they bugle, but again, not overdoing it, and just getting quieter and softer as they get closer seems to just be the tip.
Oh, it sounds good. You got me teased up on it. So, I noticed it in your note there, let's call it that, of the cow call. You don't spend a lot of time on the front end. It's a lot of the more nasal drop off on the back end. Do you found that that's the right sound to be making?
I would say so. Yes. Yeah. Because when you listen to a cow call, most of the time they can draw it out, but most of the time it's just more of that, one type sound, just that high to low.
Yeah. Do you believe in the old estrus mew that you hear guys talking about? Is that really a thing, or is that a misnomer?
I would say it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
I'm basically kind of the guy who coined that estrus scream sound. I'm not saying that it is a true estrus sound, because I've heard cows do it in the summertime. So I'm not saying that it's totally limited to the fall. But the intensity level that I've heard cows doing it at in the fall, and I've seen the bulls react to it, it's a totally different thing. And it's a sound, it's like a desperation type sound. And it's mixed with a mew, again, that just sounds absolutely like desperate, like I need some attention right now. And yeah, the sound I'm talking about is a real raspy, loud, three-dimensional sound versus a wavy cow call.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when they talk about an estrus call, they're just doing kind of a wavy, whiny, clear cow call. I'm talking about a real raspy, voicey, super aggressive sound that sounds literally like a chimpanzee screaming in a cage.
Well, you got the old Heartbreaker there with you. Do you want to give us an example?
I'm going to do it with a mouth reed, because this I do not do on an open reed. This is almost embarrassing to do, and I'm not real warmed up right now.
All right, don't worry, you're going to sound great, okay?
We can edit out the bad one.
So here's how it goes. You hear how loud and aggressive that is?
Yes.
That just flies in the face of how I call when I was talking earlier about using an open reed or a mouth reed and making standard cow calls. When I make that extra scream, that's how I blow it. And I blow it loudly and frequently. And if I get a bull bugling to it, I just walk right at him and I keep making that sound basically until we're going to have a head-on collision.
Ooh, that sounds cool.
Come on.
And this quick setup, and I'm telling you, it's intense. It's incredible.
That's cool. You know, I've experimented with that some, and I don't ever know if it's really working or not because I just tend to just throw everything at them, and I'm really trying to learn a little bit more about, you know, really what to say and when to say it. And on that note, it just would seem to me that if I'm a bull elk, or say I'm a male of a species, which I am, I'm married now, you know, but if my wife says, hey, Casey, you know, like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, why would you not make that noise all the time? You know, like, why is that not just the ace in the hole that anytime you're around a bull, you make that noise and he comes in?
Yeah, I think a lot of it for me is just my personality. I feel like that is a very aggressive, very intrusive sound out in the woods. And to be honest, I feel almost a little strange about using it around a guy that I've never guided. And I'm just my first time guiding. And usually how it goes, Casey, is I look at him and I say, okay, I'm going to blow a call that's going to sound really weird to you. It's going to be really loud. It's going to be really different than what I've been doing so far. So just bear with me here. Okay. And let's see if it works. And when I usually do it is in this scenario when there's nothing going on, no bulls are bugling, nothing happening. So I feel like I've got nothing to lose. I'm not going to spoil anything by doing it.
Yeah.
Amazing how I would literally say seriously, and I have my cousin would back this up, who's filmed with me a lot. I would say 8 to 9 times out of 10, when there's nothing going on and we start walking and trolling and I start making that sound, we have an encounter with a bull within 15 minutes of doing that.
Oh man, that's cool.
I can live by those stats.
Yeah, no kidding.
It makes everybody a believer, including me. I need to be reinforced that sound works. But again, it's a really aggressive sound, and I wouldn't, just like the bugling, I wouldn't encourage your listeners to just go, oh yeah, that's the ace in the hole. I'm going to go out and blow that. That's going to be my go-to call. You want to practice it and develop it to where it sounds really elk-like before you try it out on the elk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very cool. So the state of Arizona is a big bull state, and that's where you've done a ton of guiding, and I know you've killed some big bulls yourself as well as guided a ton of them, right? And what that ends up being is, I'm making assumptions, is that a lot of herd bulls get taken in Arizona, right? Because you're looking for the big bulls that are in the country, and usually big bulls translates to the bulls with cows. And so kind of moving a little bit away from the guys who are just trying to kill an elk and find the way to kill an elk. If a guy really wants to say, I've killed a few, or I want me versus the baddest animal in the woods, or whatever it is, and they want to target herd bulls, what are some of the things to consider when you're doing that?
Yeah, I say first, you'll get to where you can recognize a herd bull, like I was mentioning earlier, by how he sounds bugling, by the frequency of his bugling. And then if you have one or two other bulls bugling, you can usually tell which one is the herd bull by how he answers back to the other bulls. Like one of the satellite bulls bugles, you can usually hear a little less aggression in the bugle, but then you'll hear the herd bull answer him or maybe even cut him off. And to me, herd bulls, they have one of two sounds. They either have a super high, shrill bugle with a real heavy ending to it, a real at the end, and heavy grunts or heavy chuckles versus satellite bulls, or they'll do that raspy lip ball sound and follow it up with grunting mostly. So if you can get to where you can recognize, not saying that bull's going to be 400 just because he sounds great, but it's a good starting point to be able to recognize, hey, I can tell that bull's the one that's got the cows versus this one here and that one over there. I think you can narrow it down a lot better and spend your time chasing the more mature bulls that way and eventually have an encounter. I'll give you a specific example. Last year, my archery hunter, on the first 3 mornings of his hunt, we called in and he got shots at 3 mature herd bulls.
Oh my!
On the first 3 mornings. Now we didn't get any of them.
There you go.
a little bit of bull fever came into play.
I understand.
But I'm telling you, the first one within the first hour of his hunt was a 370 to 380 absolute stud of a bull. I blew a bugle. He answered in the distance. We started approaching him. He didn't make another sound. He completely stopped bugling. And as we were moving toward him, I looked and I saw a couple of cows kind of cross in front of us. And thankfully I saw them and they didn't see us. And then I looked off in the direction where those cows had come from. And there's this, I can tell it's a bull's legs and chest. I can see his neck mane kind of through a tree. And at that point, he was only about 80 to 100 yards away. Ooh. And I whispered to my hunter, I said, you stay right here. I'm going to creep back just out of sight, and I'm going to bugle at him. So knock an arrow. And I'm not kidding, guys. The minute I blew that lip ball bugle, as I explained it, that bull fired off a bugle at me and just came sauntering right over to us and right up in my hunter's face.
Oh man.
And that literally happened 3 mornings in a row, the same scenario.
Golly, dude, that's cool. So my next question, you kind of answered there, but you want to sound like his equal match whenever you do make that contact with him. Is that right?
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
I want to sound like I'm a real threat to him and a potential to steal his cows away, because I believe those cows pick a bull by not only his antler size, but also just his posturing and how he sounds. Mm-hmm. Sound like a big mature bull, that interests the cows, and also it gets his hackles up thinking, yeah, this guy's a player over here. I'm going to have to go check him out and maybe deal with him.
Man, that's cool. You've got me fired up, man. That is an awesome story, and I appreciate your quality of storytelling there too, because I can just envision it, and it just makes me so excited for what's going to happen in less than a month now.
Yeah.
And I'll say to my hunter's credit, that guy I was hunting with, he did kill a herd bull on day 10 of the hunt. We called in another herd bull.
Dude, that's something there, because I had to hunt the whole season last year, and once you get past about day 7 or 8, it takes a real dude to still pull it together and make it happen after you've hunted that long. So kudos to him on that deal for sure.
Yeah. And you guys, I'm sure you've experienced this. A lot of times what can happen is the hunt can start off, you can have some encounters, and then you can get some bad weather. In Arizona, what we get is we can get high winds. And I've just found when there's high winds, it makes it very difficult. Even if I can still hear bugling, it seems like they bugle way less when it's windy. They do not like 20 and 30 mile an hour winds. It just makes them very nervous about giving away their position.
Mm-hmm. So my last question for you, Steve, is we've had a lot of people give different answers to this type of question, but how do you find elk when you go walking out in the woods? How are you locating a bull to hunt? Are you using cow calls? Are you using bugles? Are you, glassing? How does that typically look for you?
Man, as far as calling, I hate to just dodge the question, but I do use both. Usually when I'm cow calling, I'll start off with kind of medium volume cow calls, and then I'll build toward louder, more echoey cow calls, because you can definitely locate bulls by cow calling, if you do it loud enough and in the right way. But I've gotten more and more toward, using my Rogue bugle tube and just throwing out a high pitched bugle. And then if I don't get anything to that, I'll sit there and wait for maybe 5 or 10 seconds. If I don't get an answer, I'll add a chuckle to it. So yeah, again, I'll use both
Okay.
to solicit an answer. And then as far as finding elk in general, what I'm looking for is, I'm sure a lot of your listeners know this, elk need these things to basically exist and survive. They need water, they need feed, and they need good cover. And also I'll add to that, seclusion and isolation. Most elk like better than being pressured and close to people. Although in Arizona, there are elk real close to towns and real close, civilization. But yeah, in general, by and large, elk need good shady spots to bed. They have to water, and they have to have feed. And if you find those three things in an area, you're in elk habitat, you're generally going to find them. They're just not going to be where there's not water. That's starters.
Yeah, for sure, man. So if say our listeners are interested in amping up or at least getting into the calling game, can you make a few suggestions of like what maybe they should look into getting to maybe start doing some elk calling?
Yeah, the first thing I would encourage them to do is to listen to real elk as much as possible. And there's a lot of good stuff out there on YouTube. There's a lot of great elk callers out there these days with a lot to offer. I think every person has something different to offer, maybe. So I would tell them to, pick and choose and buy into what they think will work for them from each person. As far as calls go, there's so many calls out in the market. I would say the first thing is, don't get suckered by the name of the call or the fact that it's necessarily brand new. My Heartbreaker's brand new, and it's got a pretty cool name. But the best thing about it sounds good, and that's the key. A call that sounds good will still call elk in 20, 30, 50 years from now. So tonal quality is the key. And again, when I blow a call, I'm looking for that. First of all, it needs to have a three-dimensional quality to it, and just a nasally sweetness to it is what I look for.
Back before COVID, I'd just go into Bass Pro Shops and blow calls, but they might be a little weird about that right now.
Yeah, exactly. Just crack the package open.
Oh, yeah.
Give 2 toots and stick it back in.
I used to test duck calls like that all the time, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember doing some outdoor shows where people would come up and they'd want to blow on my bugle or whatever. And I'd be like, "Are you sure? You sure to do that?"
See, man, sharing a diaphragm with a guy is just about
it's a little different.
Low on my list, man.
Yeah, I would say I have not done that. I have not done that.
Oh, that's funny. So, what about the diaphragm calls? There's hundreds, and they're all different colors and whatnot. You got a couple that you really like that you kind of worked on?
Yeah, so I've got these 3 reeds in my signature series. I've got the Elk Camp, the Royal Point, and the Time's Up. Again, I think they have cool names. That's a good start.
Yeah.
But I think the reason they sound good is because of, first of all, they're built on a more narrow frame, so you don't have a big, wide latex. I feel like the older style calls that you have a big, wide latex, they just require way more air pressure to get sound out of. And I want a call that if I just barely lean on it, just barely breathe on it, I can get sound out of it. And then I can determine my pitches and my volumes by just my tongue pressure and my air pressure. So that's the start right there. And then, the differences in the reeds is going to be by latex thickness, latex stretch, whether they have a what's called a pallet plate on them or not. I'm a huge believer in that pallet plate. Came out in the 90s that, Rocky Jacobson invented, and that, Primo's manufactured their calls on for years and still do. And of course, Rocky Mountain Hunting Calls, who I work with, really builds, calls around that pallet plate design that Rocky invented. I would encourage your listeners that that's where they want to start is with a mouth reed with a pallet plate, and go from there and just try some different ones out and see what fits their mouth the best, see what sounds the best for them. Again, when I blow a mouth reed, I want one that's sensitive and will make sounds without a lot of air pressure.
Yeah, very cool.
Makes sense.
Good tips there, man. So I know that y'all are about to really ramp up, and pretty much if you do hunt the West, like things are about to get really exciting, right? but y'all do a lot of film production stuff, and I might be wrong, but do y'all have stuff running this quarter right now?
Yeah, thank you for asking, because I haven't even touched on that. My show ELK Camp is actually airing right now on the Sportsman channel. In fact, it aired today from 5:30 p.m. to 6. I mean,
nice.
It had aired right before we got on the phone here. So it aired. It's in its third season, so I'm super pumped about that. Mm-hmm. It airs the third and fourth quarters of the year. So it basically starts in late June and airs through December. It's on Sportsman channel. So if any of your listeners out there have DirecTV or Dish Network, they can pick it up there. I don't have it, but I know you can get it on Sling. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of other places that it would air. I have some season 1 episodes loaded onto YouTube. Not all of the season 1 episodes, but some are on YouTube. I'm not able to air current episodes, if you know what I mean, because the network expects you to deliver exclusive episodes to them that they can have here. But yeah, I'm just really excited about the show and going out and getting some new fresh footage again this year. And I also edit the show, so that's kind of a love-hate relationship.
Yeah, Tyler's our editor. He understands where you're coming from for sure.
Absolutely, Tyler. It's very, very time-consuming and meticulous. And if you're a perfectionist, it can literally drive you crazy. I mean, the good news for me is I just delivered my final season 3 episode to the network. I uploaded it to the network. It got there at about 5:30 a.m. this morning, so I feel like I'm free now. I'm free to go hunt elk now.
That's a good feeling.
That's right, man. That is right. Well, we're all looking forward to it, man. So Monday nights, 5:30 to 6 or something like that. You said we can check that.
I'll simplify this. So the prime time airing is 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Gotcha. Cool. Yeah. So
you got Central, so it airs 6:30 Central, 5:30 Mountain Time. It also has an earlier airing on Mondays. It airs at 1:30 p.m. Eastern, so guys can adjust their viewing for that.
Cool.
Also, obviously, DVR it and record it and watch it at your leisure. And then it has a real late night Saturday night / Sunday morning airing. It's like 3 a.m. Sunday morning. If you're on Pacific time, it would be midnight Pacific time Saturday night.
Yeah. Awesome, man. We'll put some of those times down in the notes below just so people can make sure and catch it. Y'all are a great Instagram follow, too, and just appreciate some of the knowledge and stuff that you put out there on all your platforms. And, man, I've been following you for a little while, probably since I really got into the elk hunting stuff, 8 or so years ago. And I just really appreciate your vantage on things. I appreciate, your approach to things. You're a very kind person, it seems, Steve. So thank you so much for spending some time with us tonight, man. Do you still guide for the public? Can someone book a hunt with you right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Arizona, the key thing about Arizona is they have to draw a tag. So the hurdle to hunting with me personally in Arizona is drawing a tag. Mm-hmm. I would welcome anyone who's interested in applying for tags. And, I've also got this Zero Hunt Fees program where if someone doesn't like the thought of paying $6,000 or $7,000 for a guided hunt, I've got a Zero Hunt Fees program where they can pay $349 a year. That covers the cost of their guided hunt if they draw a tag. And I've had some members draw their very first year. So, not sell that too big, but if any of your listeners are interested, they can check out zerohuntfees.com. And if that's of interest to them, they feel free to get a hold of me. I'd love to visit with them about it.
Yes,
that's a good idea.
We'll definitely link to that below because I think I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and that is a game changer, man, for sure. I think that's a great idea on y'all's part. And I wish somebody would do it for sheep hunting too. So just drop a little bone there if you can ever figure that out. But anyway, Steve, thanks so much for your time tonight, man. We really, really appreciate it. And good luck this season.
Thank you, guys. It's been a real blessing to be on here with you guys, and best of luck on your hunts this year. And thank you again. It's been really fun to be on with you guys. And thanks to the listeners.
Now that was some killer info. Don't forget to subscribe, and a 5-star review means a ton to us.
Remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. Meat Eater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. Meat Eater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, Meat Eater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.